NXT is the lifeblood, the bedrock, the breeding ground of future WWE superstars. It's so important that we've coined the phrase the NXT call-up. And there are tons of videos of people detailing and ranking who the best NXT call-ups of all time are. But what happens when instead of a call up, there's a call down? Because periodically we have WWE superstars from the main roster make their way down to NXT. And today that's what we're going to be looking at as we rank every single WWE main roster call down to NXT, and we rank them from Hall of Fame all the way down to trash. And hey, as always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, ring the bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, I'm confident that you're going to love this channel because we upload daily wrestling content. All right, so here are the tiers that we're going to be using. We have Hall of Fame, great, good, meh, and trash. And I'm going to be ranking these call downs to NXT based on their body of work, what they accomplished. Did they really help elevate the current crop of NXT talent at the time? I'm going to be looking at a few things. And you know what? Let's start off with the one that is already on everyone's mind, the new NXT Women's Champion, Becky Lynch. And we might be doing this a little bit premature because she's only really had one match since her call down to NXT, so we don't really have this long body of work. But what I will say is that her match against Tiffany Stratton did a great job at helping make Tiffany Stratton look like an absolute superstar. Look, there's some people on Twitter that are saying, oh my goodness, they buried Tiffany Stratton. Folks, you don't know what being buried is. You can absolutely look amazing in a loss, and I think that's what happened with Tiffany Stratton, as she probably had the best match of her career in front of the biggest audience on television that she's ever had, and that was thanks to Becky Lynch's star power. And that's why these call downs from the main roster to NXT are so important, because it helps bring eyeballs to NXT, and it helps put pressure on those younger talent to perform when they're performing in the biggest stage that they've ever performed before. So Becky Lynch, again, I'm going to put her so far into the good category. I think it's unfair for me to put her really anywhere else because she's only had one match, but it is amazing to have arguably the greatest women's wrestler of all time. Don't worry, I'm not saying that unequivocally that she's the greatest of all time. I'm just saying she's in discussion, and it is arguable that she is the greatest WWE women's champion, WWE women's superstar of all time. To have her go down to NXT, help put over NXT talent, and help elevate the importance of that NXT women's title is absolutely vital and important. So I'm going to put her into the good category for now, but maybe we'll revisit her performance in NXT in a couple of months. Let's grab her husband, Seth freaking Rollins, who didn't really have a call down, more so just a one-off match to help portray the notion of the fight anytime, any place fighting champion, basically the complete opposite of Roman Reigns. Seth Rollins put out a challenge for the World Heavyweight Champion, and it was answered by NXT's biggest baddie, Braun Breaker, and they put on a decent match. But it's cool just to have somebody that is holding the biggest prize, and one of the biggest prizes in the game, because I still think Roman's titles are more important, but one of the top prizes in the entire game of the WWE, and bringing it down to help showcase other NXT talent like Braun Breaker, and helping demonstrate that people like Braun Breaker are ready to hang toe-to-toe with some of the best wrestlers on the main roster, like a Seth freaking Rollins. So even though he didn't really do much, I think his one-off appearance did the job that it was supposed to do, which is, again, to give eyeballs to NXT, to help showcase the younger talent of the future of the WWE, and it helped, of course, make him look strong because it showed that he was a fighting champion. So I'll put his one-off into the good category as well. I'm gonna get tricky with this one here, okay? You ready for this? Booker T, WWE Hall of Famer, spent many years on the main roster in the WWE, and now he is one of the head commentators over on NXT. So yes, I'm including commentators in this bad boy, but not all of them. Anyways, Booker T, look, I think I'm in the minority when I say this, that I don't love him in commentary. I think he's a little bit too much for my liking. I think that as a color commentator, he talks too much instead of just adding the color where he needs to, like a Jerry the King Lawler. Like, Lawler wasn't talking all the time. He added his color when it was appropriate to add his color, versus Booker T sometimes talks more than his partner. But hey, the people love him, and it is crucial to point out that this is a WWE WWE Hall of Famer, helping put over NXT talent with his words. Ultimately, that is the job of the commentator, not just to tell the people at home what's going on, but their job of the commentator is also to help legitimize and make the superstars that are in the ring feel legitimate, feel important, feel badass. And Booker T, you know, for his flaws that I feel like he has, I think does a really good job of doing that. But I don't know. I can't really look. If I had my way, all right, I'd probably put him into meh. But because I know I'm in the minority and a lot of people love him, I'm going to meet you in the middle. Instead of putting him in great, I'm going to put him in good. Look, I know that I'm kind of just walking the line in the sand. I'm not really giving you, any extreme opinions yet, but I promise you they're coming soon. Okay, so I got a question for you. Does Drew McIntyre count? I think he does. I don't think it was a call down. More so he was fired from the WWE, and then when he came back into NXT. Look, just for the purposes of padding this out with some big superstars, I'm going to include Drew McIntyre into this. All right, you can take it up with my manager. But Drew McIntyre did an amazing job of reinventing himself over in the independent circuit and bringing this new badass demeanor and new body, because he completely transformed himself into NXT and becoming arguably one of the greatest NXT champions of all time. He was there really for the height of NXT Black and Gold, putting on some absolutely amazing matches. And I have to say, like, his time in NXT is borderline legendary. And I know, you might not call this a call down, but I am, and I'm going to put this into the Hall of Fame category. Do you remember T-Bar from Retribution? Well, his name in NXT was Dominik Dijakovic. Then he went to the main roster and was called T-Bar, where he was part of Retribution. And then after being T-Bar, he went back down to NXT and called himself Dijak, where now he's fucking awesome. Dijak in NXT was an absolutely necessary call down to help save his career straight up and completely cleanse him of one of the dumbest gimmicks that you could have been given. I'm going to say that not only was this great for NXT because he's put on some absolute match of the year candidates with the likes of Wesley as well as Ilya Dragunov, but also great for his own career because he was able to reinvent himself in NXT. I'm putting Dijak into the great category. Next up, let's go ahead and grab Charlotte Flair. Look, I have two kind of like opposing opinions here, so you're gonna have to hang on here for this roller coaster ride. Oh, what the fuck? What is that bug? Oh, what the fuck is that? What is that fucking bug? Oh God, what the fuck is? Oh my God, it's like a fucking centipede here. I just had to step on it. It was crawling all over my balls. Jesus. I killed it. We're good. So let's talk about the good. The good is that when Charlotte Flair won the Royal Rumble, she selected to go after Rhea Ripley's NXT title. And then that meant that one of the bigger main event matches at that year's WrestleMania, which unfortunately was in front of no one because it was the Pandemomania, was for the NXT women's title. That's huge. So not only did we get Charlotte Flair helping legitimize the women's title and the women's division as a whole by choosing to challenge for the NXT women's title after winning the Rumble, but she also helped elevate that title to the point where it's being defended at WrestleMania. And to my knowledge, off the top of my head, that is the only time an NXT title has been defended at WrestleMania. So great. She did a fantastic job without stepping foot in NXT yet to help put over NXT. That's fantastic. But then she got to NXT and I think it was wholly underwhelming. And I think that she did a very poor job of helping put over the up-and-comers in the NXT women's division. It was so bad that when she dropped the title, she didn't even get pinned. Like, she only agreed to lose in a triple threat match where she wasn't the one pinned. That's just not the way to help put over that division when you're actually in there. I think it actually damaged it. That's why I didn't want to say, hey, the Becky Lynch thing is a Hall of Fame or great, because I knew that Charlotte Flair has done this before, and I don't think that she did a fantastic job. I don't think it's trash by any means, because she helped elevate that title to heights like at WrestleMania, but that was before she actually went down to NXT. So I'm going to say that this is meh. Now, before I continue, I just wanted to thank our patrons over at patreon.com/SantiZap. Because of you, I'm able to keep the lights on and the mics on, and I'm able to do this on a full-time basis. So genuinely, thank you for doing this. For just a couple of extra bucks, you're going to get more wrestling content. You're going to get the Wrestling is Cool podcast 3 days early. You're going to get the additional extra podcast called Wrestling is Cool Plus, which is only available to patrons. You're going to get the monthly mailbag video. You're going to get our monthly watch-alongs, Raw reviews, SmackDown reviews, and we're doing some gaming content as well on there. So you're going to get a lot more extra content for just a couple of bucks. Just check out patreon.com/SantiZap. The link is down in the description below, and have a look at the tiers and see if any of them work for you. Just ask that you have a look at it. But that's it. Thank you. All right, back to the video. Alex Riley. Did you forget about him? I kind of did too, but after failing on the main roster, even though he was super popular, but they just like refused to do anything with him, he went down to NXT, had some matches there, had a feud with Kevin Owens, even became a commentator, but they didn't really do anything with him. It didn't help elevate Kevin Owens or NXT or him, so trash. Next, we have Apollo Crews. If you forgot about Apollo Crews, I wouldn't blame you, because he went down to NXT, he had a feud with Carmelo Hayes, Braun Breaker, and really did nothing after that, so I'm putting him in trash. Wow, that kind of sounds exactly what I just said about Alex Riley. Drew Gulak. If you don't remember, Drew Gulak was kind of like the protege of Daniel Bryan during the SmackDown Pandemomania era, and he was renowned as one of the best technical workers in the WWE. Now he's over in NXT, being an active competitor, but also playing the role of a mentor to up-and-comers like Charlie Dempsey, and I think he's playing a fantastic role there. So I think he's doing a great job of not just, continuing to showcase how good he is in the ring, because he continues to have matches, but I think he's doing a fantastic job helping elevate the future of in-ring technicians and people like Charlie Dempsey. So I'm going to put him into the great category right next to Dominik Dijakovic. Mandy Rose. Let me tell you, what an absolutely brilliant decision to take Mandy Rose from the main roster, where she kind of just felt like she was there. She was just a body to be used every now and then. She might have a storyline, she might not have a storyline, but she didn't feel important. She just sort of felt like an extra in a movie. And then they bring her down to NXT, and things completely change as they make her one of the coolest badass heels in NXT women's history, without being like this in-ring monster like an Asuka or a Shayna Baszler. And they also had her build one of the coolest women's faction, not just in NXT, but literally like in all of professional wrestling ever. I haven't seen a women's faction as cool as Toxic Attraction. It's an absolute shame that we lost her for her other endeavors, shall we call it that, and that we didn't get more of Mandy Rose, not just in NXT, but potentially coming up to the main roster with the rest of Toxic Attraction. Not only was she able to reinvent herself, but she helped bring up two other younger talent in Gigi Dolan and JC Jane, and she also became one of the greatest NXT Women's Champion of all time, and she unified the NXT Women's UK Championship and the NXT Women's Championship into one. So, I mean, she's gonna go down in history as one of the greatest NXT Women's Champion of all time. I have to put her in amazing. Hall of Fame. Next up, we have Los Lotharios, Humberto Carrillo, and Angel Garza. And look, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't think they were ever really ready to go from NXT to the main roster. Really, they were called up to the main roster because they needed bodies during the pandemic, because there were a lot of people who were just not capable of working. There were a lot of people who were let go because of financial reasons, so it was easier to give work to the lower paid NXT talent to come do main roster work without paying them main roster wages. But once things started to normalize, some talent like Angel Garza and Humberto Carrillo were sent back down to NXT. So I don't know how much this counts, but to me it does. But down in NXT, they are an absolutely fantastic tag team that is currently revitalizing themselves, as they are no longer doing this like love shtick where they're going after women, etc. They're going back to their roots as a legendary wrestling family and demonstrating that they are badasses in the ring. And anytime that they actually have a match, it's an absolute banger. I think it's very important that they went down to NXT. There's still a lot to be seen, as this reinvention still hasn't really kicked off yet, but I can see it going into great places. So I'm going to put this into the good category for now. Next up is Dirty Dominic Mysterio. And what an absolutely brilliant decision to send Dominic down to NXT and do double duty on the main roster and NXT. See, on the main roster, he's not really able to do the job fully. And let me explain this, because in terms of matches, he's completely seen as the sideshow of Judgment Day. So he usually loses matches quick, or he wins in like super quick, dumb ways. And he's not really able to cut promos because the joke of the main roster is to boo him to Kingdom Come to the point where we can't hear him. But sending him down to NXT allows him to have full-fledged 20+ minute matches against excellent workers like Dragon Lee, like Wesley, like Mustafa Ali. So there's so many people that he's going down to NXT to have excellent matches with, so that he can become better at his craft in the ring. But then on top of that, they allow him to actually cut promos in NXT because he doesn't actually get drowned out by 10,000 people, because there aren't 10,000 people in an NXT arena. So it allows him to better his game in both sides, both as a mic worker and as an in-ring performer. An absolutely brilliant decision, and he's the champion of all of North America, unlike his deadbeat dad, who's only the champion of the United States. I'm putting him into the Hall of Fame. Next up, let's grab The New Day. And The New Day recently went down to NXT and won the NXT Tag Team Championships. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think that this really did anything for anyone. I don't think that this necessarily elevated the New Day's legacy. Sure, they can add that they're NXT Tag Champions as well, so they've won everything to do in the tag team division under the umbrella of the WWE, but they didn't really do much in terms of helping put over the tag team division as a whole, or any one particular tag team. Like, they went on to beat Pretty Deadly and take the titles off of them, and then they went on to drop the titles to the Gallus brothers in a pretty underwhelming tag team match. So all in all, like, I don't really know if they contributed that much to the tag team division as a whole, or how many eyeballs they truly brought back to NXT. Like, no disrespect to Kofi or Xavier Woods, but they're not exactly, you know, Becky Lynch or Seth Rollins levels of a draw. So I'll put the New Day into the meh category. Beth Phoenix, hey, did you know that she was a commentator for NXT? And dare I say, one of the best commentators that NXT has ever had? I'm going to put her into the good category. Cesaro in the early 2010s, after winning the US Championship, went down to NXT as well, and he had some absolute banger matches in NXT. I would say that Cesaro was the originator of the NXT banger. Like, really, he was one of the people that was involved in the first NXT classic 5-star banger in Cesaro versus Sami Zayn. So I think that he was crucial and vital in helping create the identity of NXT Black and Gold as the place where you have absolutely fantastic in-ring matches. I'm going to say that Cesaro going to NXT for that time period goes into the great category. I just think that he helped shape the identity of what NXT Black and Gold would go on to become, which was the best wrestling show on the planet. Next up, let's do Kevin Owens. He didn't really have a call down. Like, he really only had one match against Undisputed Era as a surprise entrant in the NXT War Games match. So I guess I'll put it into the meh, because there was really no story being told. It was just awesome to see Kevin Owens in a War Games match in NXT. We're doing more commentators. I've got Wade Barrett now, and Wade Barrett as an NXT commentator, I think he's the best former wrestler turned commentator in the WWE, and definitely in NXT history. I'm going to say that this absolutely was a turning point in his career to help him become one of the best commentators in the game. I'm putting Wade Barrett into the great category. Sin Cara. Did you forget about Sin Cara? I mean, I kind of did too. But yeah, he went down to NXT for a while, and he helped carry the tag division with Kalisto. And I don't really remember if Kalisto was on the main roster and also went down as well. I think Kalisto might have already been down in NXT and Sin Cara went down to tag with him. I don't know. Either way, I'm only doing Kalisto in this one. He really didn't do anything. I'll put him into the meh category. Baron Corbin going down to NXT has been absolutely great. I love what they have him doing there. I think he's showing up all those kids as to like, hey, here's how you cut a promo. Here's how you have a nice, clean match. And he is doing a fantastic job of demonstrating how to really carry yourself as a main roster member in NXT. I think Baron Corbin has been an absolute godsend for NXT. I think he's been better to NXT than NXT has been to him. I think that they need him more than he needs them. Then we have Mustafa Ali, who went down to NXT at around the same time that Baron Corbin did, but he hasn't really done too much yet. It's kind of a Becky Lynch kind of situation where he's only really done a few things, not enough for really be able to give him a proper grade. So for now, I'll put him into the good category because he's had some absolute banger matches so far, but there's still a lot more to be seen. Dana Brooke is down in NXT, and I think it's been great for her because she never really felt like she was doing anything in the main roster anyway, and she has a storyline in NXT. She has matches on a weekly basis in NXT. So I don't think that she is really helping elevate NXT in any way, shape, or form, but I think NXT is doing wonders for her to help develop her as a talent that might be more main roster ready whenever they're ready to bring her back to the main roster. So I'm going to put Dana Brooke into the good category. Next up, let's grab mommy Rhea Ripley. And Rhea Ripley has really been part of the Dominic storyline, but she's done her own things in NXT as well. And let's not mention that it's absolutely fantastic to see a main roster main champion like Rhea Ripley, who is the current World Women's Champion, down in NXT and helping put over the current crop of women's talent in NXT. She's even put her title on the line in what is honestly probably her best title match to date with Lyra Valkyria. So the combination of her bringing eyes to NXT, you know, as a very popular main roster member coming down to NXT, the fact that she's actually having matches in NXT, and the fact that she's bringing her title into NXT and defending that title in NXT, I think puts her into the great category. Next up, let's do AJ Styles. So AJ Styles really went down to NXT just to have a short feud with Grayson Waller, but I really think that the feud with Grayson Waller was important in terms of helping shape Grayson Waller into the man that he is today. Next up after this, I am going to be doing Johnny Gargano, and I'm going to be saying a lot of the same things, but it's these types of feuds, these types of matches that allow these NXT superstars to become main roster ready, because one of the problems with NXT Black and Gold as a whole, and there's not that many problems with NXT Black and Gold because I think at its time it was the greatest wrestling show of all time, but the big problem is that a lot of the call-ups weren't ready for main roster television. They weren't ready for the way that they do things on the main roster, and people like AJ Styles, even though he was just there for a short feud with Grayson Waller, allowed to help Grayson Waller get a feel of what it's like to face off against a main roster member and how to have a main roster feud, and that helped Grayson Waller have an incredibly smooth call-up to the point where I would say that he is probably the most main roster ready NXT call-up of all time in terms of presentation, promo skills, in-ring work. He's literally the entire package. I'm going to put AJ Styles into the good category. I can't really put him much higher than this because he really only had one match. And I'm going to put Johnny Gargano right in there as well because he basically did the same thing. He was Shawn Michaels' trump card to help in a feud against Grayson Waller, and he played the same role that AJ Styles played, and he had an absolutely fantastic match with Grayson Waller. Next up, let's grab Dolph Ziggler and kind of by association Bobby Roode as well. So this is divisive for some people because a lot of people felt that Dolph Ziggler helped ruin the momentum of Braun Breaker, but I say that Braun Breaker needed to have his momentum halted for a second, and rather than him being the final boss, the gatekeeper of the championship, I think he needed to be the one chasing the championship, and I think Dolph Ziggler allowed Braun Breaker to become that. Because Braun Breaker was on an absolute tear. He looked entirely unbeatable. There was no one at the time that could really beat Braun Breaker. Hell, when Dolph Ziggler came down to challenge Braun Breaker, he didn't feel like a credible threat to Braun Breaker. So we needed somebody to humble Braun Breaker so that we can become empathetic of Braun Breaker rather than, getting tired of him being shoved down our throats, so that we can root for Braun Breaker as he now has a challenge, a ladder to climb, and something to chase. Because Braun Breaker for a long time was seen as the problem by a lot of main roster fans because he was seen as the embodiment of NXT 2.0, and I think that's a fair way to put it because he literally is the one that destroyed the NXT Black and Gold logo and brought about the new era of NXT 2.0. 2.0. So we needed a feud for him to really allow us to become empathetic to Braun Breaker. And that was pretty much the entire feud that Dolph Ziggler had. It lasted months. Like, his reign also was not just like a, 1 week reign. Like, he had a pretty substantial reign as NXT champion. And frankly, he wasn't doing anything on the main roster anyway. So why not use Dolph Ziggler, who we know is a fantastic worker, to elevate the up and coming superstar? Because Braun Breaker, like it or not, he's going to be the top guy in the WWE within the next 10 years. I think is a great decision. I'm putting Dolph Ziggler into the great category. Next up, let's do the Samoan submission machine, Samoa Joe. This was just weird because Samoa Joe was fired from the WWE only to be brought back like a week later and sent down to NXT to help put over NXT talent during the pandemic era. And he was supposed to be kind of like a WWE official or kind of like the muscle to somebody like a William Regal. Eventually, he went on to have a feud with Karrion Kross and beat Karrion Kross for the NXT title, making Samoa Joe, as far as I know, the only 3-time NXT champion. But this would suck because he would go on to have to relinquish his championship because he got COVID, which is kind of just like the story of life back then. Like, that's just how it was. If you got COVID and you were holding a championship, you had to drop it and you had to separate yourself from the rest of the main roster, the rest of the NXT roster. So it's a shame because we never really got what could have been, because shortly after that stint with COVID, he was released again. So we never really got what we were meant to get with Samoa Joe. So kind of like by default, it goes into the meh category. And last but not least, let's go ahead and grab Finn Balor. And Finn Balor has really had 2 returns back down to NXT, where he had a great match with Carmelo Hayes, but then he also went down to have a full rerun of his NXT career after losing to The Fiend at SummerSlam 2019. And I think that call down was absolutely brilliant. For the first time, we were seeing heel Finn Balor, something that we've been clamoring for a really long time. And a lot of people that only watch the main roster really didn't get to see until he became part of Judgment Day years later. But I'm telling you, this is an absolutely fantastic run. It helped revitalize his career after it stalling after a few years of borderline just mediocrity and doing not much on the main roster. This really helped jumpstart Finn Balor, and we got Finn Balor rejuvenated on the main roster after this run. So it did great for Finn Balor, but it was also absolutely vital to help putting over NXT talent and making NXT must-watch television. So this absolutely goes into the Hall of Fame. All right, that's it. All right, that's it. What do you think of this list? Get out of here, though.